Yeah, so we're in Psalm 115, and Psalm 115 is, well, just so you know on the front end, we're only doing half of the psalm today. Next week, it says in the bulletin, if you're looking at it, it says we're supposed to be in Psalm 44, but we've already done Psalm 44. So I decided not to do it again, and we're just splitting Psalm 115 up here into 2 weeks. So just a heads up for that. We're only going to go verses 1 through 8, and then we'll finish the rest of the psalm next week. But so Psalm 15 is really talking about idolatry, and it's idolatry, but in the form of the psalmist just contrasting what people in the ancient Near East, that's Israel culture when they were around, when the time of the Old Testament, it's really contrasting what people in the ancient Near East used to worship with the God of the Bible. The psalmist is just going to put them next to each other and say, this is who God is, this is what idols are, and you take a look at the difference. So that's kind of what's happening mostly in the first 8 verses, and then it's kind of a praise for the remainder of the psalm. But a few things you need to know on the front end about idolatry. First, you need to know what it is. So, most basically, idolatry is just anything that takes the honor, the glory, or the throne of God. And in ancient Near Eastern culture, that was very physical. They made idols out of something, gold or silver or whatever they had, and then they worshipped them. In our culture, not so apparent. It's a little bit harder to identify, but I do think they're there. Ancient Near Eastern culture, you need to understand the difference between what the Bible's saying and what everybody around Israel believed. Everybody around Israel believed that multiple gods created the world. Okay, so there was this polytheism, multiple, many, or gods, that created everything. They created humanity, they created creation, and they're just kind of ruling up there themselves. These multiple gods were typically gods over certain things. The wind, the sea, mountains, trees, these sorts of things. They were connected to something specific, the stars, love, war, and they were worshipped for those things, for providing those very specific things. The other major difference between ancient Near Eastern gods and the Israelite God is they were regional. They had bounds. They were only in a certain area. And you're going to see the psalmist in Psalm 115 just go at these different things that people around them were worshiping as idols. He's just going to attack them kind of head on. You'll see that in the psalm. But you need to know the reason why the psalmist is making these specific claims about who God is because he's just jabbing away at the idols that people worshipped around them. So that's largely what he's doing here in Psalm 115. The God of Israel is one God. He's over all creation. And he's not bound to a region. And he's not bound to a thing. So the psalmist is going to make that very clear here. And the reason he's making that very clear is because he wants people around them to know, we do not serve the same God that you serve. Our God is not like yours and the people around them. So let's jump in. Psalm 115. Verse 1 sounds a whole lot like we just sung. Not to us, but to your name be the glory. For the sake, for the sake of your, let's just keep reading before that happens. For the sake of your steadfast love and your faithfulness, why should the nations say, where is their God? So this is the nations kind of stepping up saying, come on, Israel, like, really, you serve this God who's over all creation, and like, where is he? He doesn't really seem to be working for you. Listen to verse 3. Our God is in the heavens. He's not over an area. He's not bound by a region. Our God is in the heavens, and the heavens are everywhere. He does all that he pleases. He's not bound to a thing. He's not bound to the water or the sea or trees or love or war. He's not bound to these things. He does simply as he pleases, And that's it. This is jab number one at the idols that are living around them. This is not the same God that you worship. Our God is over yours, and he's in control of everything. Way higher, way wider than the gods that were being worshipped in ancient Israel. And then he's going to describe what those other idols look like. Verse 4, it says, their idols are silver and gold, the work of human hands. By default, that would mean the God that they serve is not the work of human hands. They have mouths, but do not speak. We're going to break these down as we go, these different things that he's talking about, idols. They're very physical when he's talking about them. They're literally crafting things with eyes and noses and mouths and throats, and none of these things actually act the way that they're supposed to, but we should unpack each one as we go. So they have mouths, but don't speak, which means they're mute. They don't reveal anything to anyone. They can't speak. You could go to them, you could worship them, you could ask them to reveal truth to you, but they can't. They have mouths, but they don't speak. I tried to find modern day equivalents to each one of these, and if you don't like the analogies, you can pick your own and stick it in, and I don't care. But most of them are pretty ironic. The one I thought of for mouths but can't speak is the person who idolizes food. It goes in, but it never tells you what you want to hear. It can help you cope, but it never reveals anything to you. I mean, it can get you through from day to day, but at the end of the day, if you pray to it and say, I need you to help me or reveal something to me, it never will. There's people out there who idolize food, and it becomes terrible for them in their life. Eyes but do not see, the second half of that verse says. Eyes but do not see. It's curious because one of the major things the psalm talk about is the awareness of God. That he sees everything, that he knows what's going on. And yet the description here of idols is they have eyes, but they don't see anything, which means they're not aware of anything, which means they're not going to come to your aid. Because they don't know. They're blind. And this was also horribly ironic. I was thinking about this last night. It's like people who idolize appearance, or what looks like on the outside. With their eyes they see, but they miss everything that's on the inside. This is people who idolize, they're spending hours and hours and hours getting ready. Why? Because, I can't go out looking like that. Is it okay to dress nice? Yeah, it's okay. But there's a difference. There's a fine line between I just want to look good and I have to look good. Or maybe people won't accept me. There's a blindness that comes from realizing that it ain't all about what's on the outside. The next verse starts with, they have ears, but they do not hear. This is kind of the rebuttal to the person who says, well, it's okay if the God in heaven can't see everything because, if we're praying to him, he can at least hear us and he knows what's going on, so then he might be able to respond. No, he also has ears but cannot hear. Which means now there's really no chance of him responding. He's completely unaware and unable to respond to requests because he doesn't even know the requests that you're making. You see the uselessness of idols at this point? I mean, we haven't even made it through the rest of them, but already at this point we have an idol that cannot hear anything you're saying, cannot see anything that's going on in your life, and cannot respond because he's mute. He's deaf, blind, mute at this point. I thought of this at this point of People who idolize celebrities, how many people actually get a chance to ever say anything to those people? Maybe every once in a while. But in a lot of ways, they are deaf. Idols that can't hear. Somebody's idolizing you, but you don't know it because you live thousands of miles away and people will just read magazines about you. They're deaf. They offer nothing to you. The next one's kind of weird. Ears but do not hear, noses but do not smell. This is a jab at idols straight out of the sacrificial system of Israel. So within the sacrificial system of Israel, part of the reason why they say you should sacrifice animals and burn them is to offer an aroma pleasing to God. So the smoke, the smell that literally comes from burning an animal is an aroma pleasing to God. Now, it's not the actual smell that's pleasing to God. It's the fact that you're being obedient in following the law. You're doing the sacrifices that you're supposed to be doing. So when it says they have noses but do not smell, it's literally saying they cannot be pleased by your obedience to them. They don't care. Idols don't care whether you're faithful or whether you're not. This one's for me was sort of easy. Money. How many non-faithful, non-honest people are rich out of their mind in this world? Money doesn't care. It doesn't care whether you spend it wisely. It doesn't care whether you use it well. It goes to people who use it well, and it goes to people who don't use it well. It's careless. It just doesn't care whether you're obedient or not. Live your life however you want. Doesn't care. Money will come, money will go. The next one is hands but do not feel. There's a sense of numbness that you get back from idolatry. Could you imagine having hands? I can't really imagine this, but hands but do not feel. It's like, I don't know if you've ever had something numbed before, but it's like when you touch it, you can feel pressure, but that's kind of it. No sensation. No hot, no cold, no warning signs, no sharp, no rough, no nothing to tell you this is dangerous or this is good. Senseless. Easiest one I thought to connect this to was addiction. A numbness that exists. You're still living. You're still here. But because of the addiction, you feel nothing. The next one is feet, but they do not walk. They're paralyzed. This is a curious one because the Christian God, Jesus, is the only one who does this one, even today. He's the only one that came with feet and walked among us. No other religion offers that. No idol offers that. No other religion currently offers that. A God who came and walked among us. This one alone is enough to point to Jesus and say, glaring like, this is the God you want to serve. I thought of selfishness or narcissism for this one. People want to say all the time, I can just do it on my own. If I just work a little harder, I can just have a little more money. I mean, I can just treat people a little better, a little nicer. I can just be a better parent. I can just read a couple more books. I can just be a little more educated. You get that you're still paralyzed when it comes to sin, right? You can do all those things. You can be a little better parent. You can read a couple more books. You can get a little more educated. You can work a little harder. But at the end of the day, you cannot get out of your sin on your own. You're paralyzed, stuck in that. The last one says, they do not make a sound with their throat. They're lifeless. If you don't know, the only way that you can make sound with your throat is with air. You can't make sound with your throat without air. And breath in the Bible is spirit. It's your life source. It's the fact that you're alive. They're, quite simply, not alive. Now, anything that we've talked about can fit into this category of not being alive, if it's idolatry, but probably, and maybe the most obvious one, is stuff, materialism, things. They are not alive. They have no life, no breath. They cannot come to you. They're kind of the quintessential culmination of deafness and blindness and muteness, of not being able to feel anything. They are, as a whole, lifeless. They have no breath in their lungs. Now, like I said before, we don't carve images like they used to. We don't do silver and gold in our culture. You want to go to India where you can still see those things? They have those. They're all over the place. They still have them. But we don't really do that. So I'm trying to give you some of these other things to think about in your life. We didn't cover things like relationships. One of the most scary things that I have had in getting married was that I would end up idolizing my wife. I mean, she's great. And I want to love her and honor her and lift her up as best as I can, but she's not God. And she can never do those things for me. I said it before, there's this fine line between loving and honoring, valuing something, and flopping over into, if I lost my wife, I don't know what I would do, ever. I would just be completely lost. That's a problem. It'd be hard? Yeah, it'd be extremely hard. But you'd only be completely lost if you were worshiping that person. Because if you were worshiping God, then you wouldn't have lost everything. And that's a tough balance to maintain. Honoring, loving, and serving to death, but not idolizing. For me, it's one of the scariest things. And sometimes I feel like I go back and forth on that line. Because there are days when I've thought, man, I just don't know if I would survive without her. And then I think to myself, man, is that okay? I mean, maybe it just should be really, really hard, but I should still rest in the fact that God is the one whom I serve. Maybe success, or jobs, or sport. For a time in my life, if you would have asked me, actually not that long ago, when I was in college, if you would have asked me this question, what do you live for? Classic idol finding in your life question. What do you live for? If you answer that question with anything else besides God, there's a problem. There's a time in my life where if you would have asked me that question, I'd have said, I live for a game. I live for a 28-inch piece of leather filled with air that you kick around a grass pitch. I did. And I remember somebody asking me that question, and that was my response, only to go, shoot. Got a problem. Didn't even know it. It doesn't have to be something outright like a graven image. It can be sneaky, and oftentimes it is. Why is this important? Why is it important for the psalmist to tell us the difference between the character of the God of the Bible and the character of idols? Why is this so intricately important? Read verse 8. Those who make them become like them, and so do all who trust in them. Mute, blind, deaf, careless, senseless, paralyzed, lifeless. You find those things in your life coming up, you may have an idolatry problem that you didn't even know about. For me, that wasn't necessarily the most scary thing. I'm going to Isaiah chapter 6, verses 9 and 10, where he kind of picks up this same sort of theme. This is to me where it got a little bit more scary. This is Isaiah speaking on behalf of God. 6, 9, and 9 and 10, it says this. He said, "Go say to the people this." This is the Lord speaking to Isaiah. "Say to the people this, keep on hearing, but do not understand. Keep on seeing, but do not perceive. Make the heart of this people dull and their eyes heavy, ears heavy, and blind their eyes, lest they," you ready? "See with their eyes, hear with their ears, and understand with their hearts, turn and be healed." You may not see it as clearly here. Go to Matthew 13. What he's saying is that you miss the things of God when you worship idols. You see, if all of Israel just kept being blind and deaf and having a heart of stone, they would never turn to God and be saved. That's the danger that comes along with idolatry. It's a little bit more clear in Matthew 13. Sorry for you guys who are going through this in Bible study. You guys just plowed through this, but we're going to go through it again because it fits. We're going to read through these first couple sections here, all the way to verse 16. It says this. "That same day Jesus went out of the house," this is Matthew chapter 13, "and sat beside the sea, and great crowds gathered about him, so that he got into the boat and sat down, and the whole crowd stood on the beach. He told them many things in parables, saying, A sower went out to sow. He sowed. Some seeds fell along the path, and the birds came and devoured them. Other seeds fell on the rocky ground, where they did not have much soil, and immediately they sprung up, since they had no depth of soil. But when the sun rose, they were scorched. And since they had no root, they withered away. Other seeds fell among the thorns, and the thorns grew up and choked them. Other seeds fell on the good soil and produced grain, and some 100-fold, some 60, some 30. He who has ears, let him hear." And it goes on. Then the disciples came and said to him, "Why do you speak in parables? Can't you just tell us plainly what's going on? Why do you always speak in parables?" He answered to them, "To you it has been given to know the secrets of the kingdom of heaven, but to them it has not been given. For to the one who has, more will be given, and he will have an abundance. But from the one who has, not even what he has will be taken from him. This is why I speak to them in parables. Because seeing they do not see, and hearing they do not hear. They do not understand. Indeed, in their case, the prophecy is fulfilled of Isaiah that says, You will indeed hear, but never understand. You will indeed see, but never perceive. For the people's heart has grown dull, and with their ears they can barely hear. Their eyes they have closed, lest they should see with their eyes and hear with their ears, understand with their hearts, and turn, and I would heal them. But blessed are your eyes, for they see. Your ears, for they hear. For truly I say to you, many prophets and righteous people long to see what you see, and they did not see it, and hear what you hear, they did not hear it." You understand why Jesus speaks in parables. It's because people have an idolatry problem. They're mute and blind and deaf, paralyzed, senseless, lifeless because of the things they worship. And they miss the things of God. You cannot understand these things that Jesus is saying when you're lifeless. if you're deaf or mute, to me, this is the scariest thing. To me, it's like, oh, well, I could live deaf, mute, or blind, and I might still get by from day to day. But when you flip to the New Testament and realize that Jesus is saying you will miss the things of God if you remain idolatrous in your life, that terrifies me. Because I don't want to miss those things. And yet the reason why Jesus is speaking in parables is so that the ones who really want to worship him will understand, and the ones who don't, they won't. If you don't want to miss the things of God, you have to avoid idolatry in your life. Some people make church an idol. Why are you here? Many people used to go to church because it's socially acceptable. It's kind of fading today. Some people still go to church because it's a check off the list. I was supposed to do it. Some people go to church just because it's habit. It's what I've always done. Sundays, it's what I do. It's worship days. I go to church. Great. If coming here to glorify God is not your reason for coming, then there's a problem. If it's just habit, or it's just a social thing, reason for coming here should be to glorify God. The magic question then becomes, how do we avoid idolatry? If we're supposed to avoid idolatry so that we can hear the things of God, so that we can be saved and live righteously, then how do we avoid it? Not to us, but to your name be the glory. That's it. It's intentionally glorifying God in your life. With the things that you say, with the things that you do, with what you think about at your job, at your home, with your wife, with your kids. If you're intentionally glorifying God, you avoid idolatry. It's when we forget. It's when we just walk around as if, I got this, and I'm doing great, and yeah, of course I love Jesus, where all of a sudden stuff starts to pile up in our houses that it's like, why are we spending money on this? When all of a sudden we start looking at a person going, I just want to be like them. Why can't I look a little bit more like that person? If you want to avoid idolatry, hear the things of God. Understand these crazy parables that Jesus spoke in. You have to avoid idolatry. And I think one of the best ways to do that is to glorify God. Glorify God with what you sing. Not just here. Day to day. I don't know which one of those things it is for you. Like I said, I don't really care. You can put in anything, fill in the blank. Doesn't have to be one of those. If you don't want to miss the things of God, you have to work at avoiding idolatry. Pray with me. God, thanks that you are not like the idols of the ancient world. Thanks that you're alive, that you see us, you hear our prayers, you understand what's going on with us, that you literally have a son who came so we could touch him, so that we could know that there's life living beyond ourselves. God, would you help us to glorify you with our lives so that we can avoid worshiping other things, giving the throne and the glory and the honor to other things in our life, so that we can hear from you and understand. God, don't leave us blind, deaf, or careless. Convict us where conviction is necessary, God. And give us the strength and the breath to glorify you. In Jesus' name.